all know how great is our God, so we can just make up words as we go, right? The splendor of our King. See? The splendor of our King, clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice, all the earth rejoice. He wraps himself in light, and darkness tries to hide, trembles at his voice, trembles at his voice. How great, come on. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. Oh, we'll see how great is our God. Age to age, come on. Age to age he stands. Time is in his hand, beginning and the end, beginning and the end. The Godhead 3 in 1, Father, Spirit, and Son, Lion and the Lamb, Lion and the Lamb. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. Oh, we'll see how great is our God. Name above all names, name above all names. You are worthy of all praise, and my heart will sing how great is our God. Let's do that part one more time. Name above all names, huh? Name above all names. You are worthy of all praise, and my heart will sing how great is our God. That chorus, come on. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. Oh, we'll see how great is our God. Leslie spent probably 45 minutes to an hour working on slides because we had new songs. Funny, love it, gotta love it. Great.
Pardon me? I'm asking for
But we don't need slides. No, thank you so much.
yes.
Appreciate it.
Bring it all storms are raging me to still every wave at the name Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble, Jesus, Jesus. Silence fear, Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble, Jesus, Jesus. Call these bones to live, call these lungs to sing once again. I praise Jesus, Jesus.
have our opening prayer at this time.
And does everybody have the same amount of fingers that they went into the week with? That's good. Sounded like a war movie at my house the last few nights, and the dogs didn't appreciate it. Had a man come by the store the other day and said, "Yeah, I got $600 worth of fireworks in the trunk of my car." And I'm thinking to myself, what are you going to have when you're finished? Oh, well. Right now, the daily Bible reading plan I'm following is in the books of 1st and 2nd Kings. And it just amazes me how the Israelite people could just keep falling away like they did. And so-and-so became king and did not follow the ways of David. And so became king and followed evil. But then I look around the world we live in now, and guess what, folks? We're times not a whole lot different than they were. Would you bow with me, please? Good morning, Father. Your family's here. We're here because we love you. We want to learn more. We want to become stronger. We want to support each other. We want to be your light in the ever-pressing darkness of today, Lord. We ask you to give us boldness, wisdom, and trust in you, to live our lives in such a way that people know that we are different and set apart, and that people will look at us and say, wait a minute, he has a better way. She has a better way. How can he or she have that kind of peace in the turmoil that they face? And that peace comes from you, Lord. So pour your Spirit out upon us this morning. Be with Adam. Give him the words that we need to hear, Lord, and give us the hearts to hear those. In Jesus' name, amen.
We're going to start with the chorus on this song. Love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. 'Cause your love never fails and it never gives up, never runs out on me. It's your love. Higher. It's higher than the mountains that I face, stronger than the power of the grave, constant in the trial and the change. 'Cause there's one thing remains. 'Cause your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. 'Cause your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. 'Cause your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Oh, it's your love. We're going to go into the bridge in death and in life. In death, in life, I'm confident, covered by the power of your great love. My debt is paid. There's nothing that can separate my heart from your great. One more time on that bridge. In death, in life, I'm confident, covered by the power of your great love. My debt is paid. There's nothing that can separate my heart from your great love. 'Cause your love never fails, never gives up, never runs out on me. 'Cause your love never fails, never gives up, never runs out on me. gives up, never runs out on me. 'Cause your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Oh, it's your love, your love, your love, your love. We will have our offering at this time.
Shame is a prison as cruel as the grave. Shame is a robber and he's come to take my name. Love is my redeemer, lifting me up off the ground. Love is the power where my freedom song is found. There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. When I hear that trumpet sound, gonna rise up out of the ground. There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. Fear is a liar with a smooth and velvet tongue. Fear is a tyrant, it's always telling me to run. Love is a resurrection, love is a trumpet sound. Love is my weapon, I'm gonna knock my giants down. There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. When I hear that trumpet sound, gonna rise up out of the ground. There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. There was a battle, a war between death and life, and there on a tree the Lamb of God was crucified. He conquered death, he took back every key. He rose up as a lion, now he's setting all the captives free. There ain't no grave could hold his body down. There ain't no grave could hold his body down. When he heard that trumpet sound, he rose up out of the ground. There ain't no grave could hold his body down. There ain't no grave could hold his body down. There ain't no grave could hold his body down.
If you are going to the elementary class, your teacher today I have is Emma Ellis. If you're going to the teen class, I have your teacher is Alice Goodman. And if your kids need to go to the nursery, that's going to be Sylvia Ladow today. If you'd like to follow along with the sermon in the YouVersion Bible app, you can do so by opening up that app, going to Events, North Augusta Church is Us. Those are our notes. We're still in a holiday weekend, so as you can see, we've got lots of people traveling. We are nearing the end of the series that I've been doing that I took a nice big 3-week break in the middle of. But we're getting close to the end of it. It's on the miraculous signs that are found in the Gospel of John. Whereas the other Gospels will refer to them as miracles, John refers to them exclusively as signs. He says that there are so many of them, he couldn't, if he wrote them all down, they wouldn't fit in all the books in all the libraries in all the world, which may be a slight exaggeration, but his point is there were a whole lot of them, which makes it interesting that he only picks 7. You might say 8. That 8th one is in a technically different category. We'll talk about it next week, but we're getting to the 7th sign today. And when you go through them, and I'm not going to recap them all today, but when you go through them, the ones that he picks, given the fact that he says he has so many to choose from, the ones that he picks, I think the technical term is they're weird. Like they're really, really strange. Some of them he doesn't even appear to want to do at the beginning. He gets talked into. Most of them are responses to something. And almost never are they paired with, and here's the message that I want you to believe, and I'm doing this sign so that you can see it. It just defies every explanation that we have for why Jesus does miraculous signs. So let's go into this one. It's no exception to the weird rule. You can find it in John chapter 11, starting in verse 1. Now, a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sister sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, so when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk in the daylight will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when people walk at night that they stumble, for they have no light." After he said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." His disciple replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I'm glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of his disciples, "Let us go also, that we may die with him." All right, a lot going on there. Jesus has these friends that you've met before, Mary and Martha. There's a whole other story that we talk about them, and they have a brother named Lazarus, who's apparently a very, very good friend of Jesus's. When Lazarus becomes sick, and very seriously sick, they send for him. Now, it's not a matter of sending him a text. They can't call him on his cell phone. They can't call him on a regular phone. They don't have that. They have to send the guy out to actually find him. When the guy actually runs him down, Lazarus has been sick the whole time the guy's looking for him. When he finds him, they sent this message that, "Hey, Mary and Martha said that your friend is sick." Then it says something bizarre. It says, "Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, and so he waited for another 2 days." The logic of that statement is not obvious to me. What you expect it to say is, now Jesus loved them very much, so he just stopped what he was doing and he went. But that's not what it says. It says, now Jesus loved them, and so he waited around for 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, "All right, we got to go over to Bethany. We got to go back to Judea." His disciples say, "Hey, Jesus, I don't mean to tell you your business, but we were there recently, and if my memory serves me right, everybody got mad at you, and they wanted to throw rocks at you until you died. Do you really think it's the best idea for us to go back?" Jesus doesn't really budge on it. He says, Lazarus has fallen asleep. The disciples displaying that they still don't get metaphors, say, oh, good, if he's asleep, then he's going to get better. Jesus, in the most exasperated you will see him about them not getting metaphors, it says, so he decided to tell them plainly, Lazarus is dead, but I'm glad that it worked out this way so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. I think there's a slight implication, and so that you might begin to get metaphors, but he says, we're going. At that point, he walks out of the room, and Thomas, also known as Didymus means the twin, Thomas, who you know as Doubting Thomas, who consistently gets a bad rap because this is his response. He, at that point, turns to the rest of the disciples and says, all right, boys, if he's going to Judea, let's just go with him and die. He's on board. He doesn't think it's going to work out any differently. He believes both of them. He says, they're going to kill us. But if he's going there, we're going with him. I'm in. All right, that's the setup for this story. It's super weird so far, and we haven't even got to the sign. Lazarus is sick. Jesus finds out about it. He loves them, so he waits around for 2 more days. The disciples are freaked out because they think they're going to kill him when they get there. Jesus seems unfazed by that. He drops a metaphor about sleep and death. They don't get it. He explains it plainly, and then Thomas says, all right, if you're going, we're going, and we'll just all get killed. John chapter 11, starting verse 17. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now remember, they sent a message when he was sick, but they had to find him, so it takes a while. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection on the last day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she told him. I believe that you are Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into the world. Okay, so Jesus gets to town. He finds out that not only has Lazarus died, he's been in the tomb for 4 days. And then Martha meets him on the road. And Martha says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And it sounds horribly disrespectful until you realize that she's right. She's not wrong. He got the news, and he waited around. If he had been there, he could have stopped it. He'd been healing lots of people. But when somebody he really loves comes, he doesn't get a move on. He waits around for 2 days. Her criticism is not wrong. I also want you to notice that Jesus is not offended by it. You don't get, how dare you question me? She says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died, but I know that even now God will give you whatever you want. Now, at that point, you think, oh, wait, she knows where this story is going. And so Jesus says, he helps her out. He throws her a bone. He says, tell you what, your brother's going to rise again. And then dispelling all hope that she gets it. Her response at that point is, oh, I know he'll rise again on the last day in the resurrection. If you look at Old Testament Judaism, an understanding, a consistent understanding of the afterlife, it's very, very difficult to find. It's just not there. Every once in a while, they borrow concepts from the Babylonians, like Sheol, which is a place that everybody goes, whether they're good or bad, and it just kind of stinks. You just don't have a definitive concept of the afterlife, a well-developed one. It's getting there. By the end of it, Jesus confirms a lot of stuff in terms of resurrection, but most of what you understand about the afterlife comes from the New Testament. It's just not in the Old Testament. Matter of fact, Orthodox Jews, matter of fact, if you read the big debate between the Pharisees and the Sadducees in the New Testament is over the resurrection. The Pharisees are actually the progressives on that point because they believe there is a resurrection. The Sadducees believe there's nothing. They have no concept of an afterlife. It's part of the reason they collaborate with the Romans, because they think this life is all you got. So how do we work out, if these guys are in charge, how can we work out temple worship and that kind of thing? Because we're the covenant people of God. They're not doing anything based on afterlife because they don't have a belief in one. The Pharisees are the ones who believe in a resurrection. And most of the Jews at that time, if they believe in resurrection, don't even necessarily believe that's for everyone or even all the good people. It's just sort of for the really exceptional people. So that's the concept that Martha is speaking out of. Jesus says, your brother will rise again. She thinks he's giving him a nod that, hey, Lazarus is a really, really good guy. When God resurrects some people, he's going to be in. And her response seems to be, well, I know he's really, really good. I know in the resurrection he'll rise again on the last day. That he's going to be one of those. But she doesn't get where this is going with Jesus. Now, do you know why she doesn't get it? Well, of course you do. Because it's a ridiculous thing to think. You don't think, even if you know somebody who can help with a sickness, your next move is not, but I know since you're here, you can wave your hands around or say something and he'll walk out of his grave. That's crazy unless it happens. Right? It's not the kind of thing you expect, because I'm going to float this out there. Even back in the first century, still weird. Still not a common occurrence. Still not something people expect. In their experience, dead people stay dead. Much like your experience. And I want you to put it in that context, because as much stuff is different when we talk about cultural differences, their approach to this is very similar to yours. Their experience on this is very similar to yours. It wasn't a period of time where when somebody died, it's not like comic books where somebody dies and you go, they'll probably be back in 3 issues. That's not, somebody died, they stay dead. And then Jesus says this, he goes, hey Martha, don't you understand? I am the resurrection and the life. He doesn't say, hey Martha, don't you get it? I got the power of resurrection. I can do that right now. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. She still doesn't quite get it. I mean, the next thing she says is true. It just doesn't appear to have a lot to do with what he said. Hey, I know you're the Messiah, God's deliverer who's come into the world. That's good enough. They move on from there. Pick up in verse 28. After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here, she said, and he's asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now, Jesus had not yet entered the village, but he was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her, along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him, he asked. Come and see, Lord, they said. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. So Martha has this interaction with Jesus, and she immediately goes back to the house to find her sister Mary, and she says, Mary, the teacher's here. He finally made it, and he's asking for you. Mary gets up immediately and goes to meet him. Now, the Jews who are also there, there's something that's sort of buried there. The Jews have this, and it's still practiced in some places, this practice, this tradition called sitting Shiva, where they'll come and, if you're in mourning, they'll come and they will sit with you for, I believe it's 7 days. And when I mean they'll sit with you, they'll come and sit with you. They don't say anything. It's one of the smartest traditions anybody's ever come up with. Because in that first 7 days especially, most of what people come up with to say is stupid, at best. We want to explain away something that doesn't have a good explanation, and the explanation wouldn't help if you got it right. Because you're still hurt, you've still lost, you're still suffering. good explanation might actually make it worse. So the Jews that are around her are sitting there, and what they do is they sit there, they are present, they take care of needs, but they don't talk. They don't talk to her, they don't ask a bunch of questions, they don't offer a lot of explanations. So when they see how quickly she gets up and goes, they go with her because they assume that she's going to her brother's tomb to mourn. And they want to be there to support her. She goes to Jesus instead, and she says the exact same thing that Martha said. Lord, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And Jesus' response to her is not the same. That's interesting because Mary and Martha are not the same people. You get that from the other story we know about them. They have very different personalities. They have very different approaches to life. When Martha asks, Jesus says all this stuff about, he'll rise again. I am the resurrection and the life. When Mary says it, he's deeply troubled in spirit. And he just asks the question, where'd you lay him? Where's he buried? Where's the tomb? The crowd answers for Mary because that's the kind of thing they're there to do. Come and see, we'll show you. And then you get the verse that most of us who grew up going to Sunday school know because it was the easiest memory verse to check off the list because it's 2 words long. That fact makes us miss how profound it is. Because do you think Jesus knows what he's going to do? Well, yeah, given his interaction with Martha, she still doesn't know, but he knows. I am the resurrection and life. Not just talking about on the last day. I'm about to do a thing. You could see him going, Mary, 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 don't be silly. I'm here. I know you don't get this yet, but it's going to be impressive. But Jesus weeps. Jesus, who is God in flesh, Jesus, who is the best image that we have of God, in the middle of pain and suffering, doesn't explain it away, isn't above it. But when he sees Mary suffering, when he sees the people around her suffering, even though he knows what he's going to do, even though he knows he has the power to undo death, he enters into the pain and suffering. It's where he naturally goes. He weeps as they weep. And that's an important point. I beg you not to rush past it. Because if you're not careful, other concepts of God's creep in on ours. And they posit God as this unmoved mover, as this very just meticulous, logical, mechanical, unmoved by human emotions being. That's about as close to heresy as anything I know. If God's most clearly seen in Jesus, that concept of God cannot stand. And John especially wants you to know it because he includes a detail that a lot of people would have skipped. When faced with the suffering of the people that he loves, Jesus weeps. Even when he knows what he's going to do about it. He joins them in their suffering. He doesn't rush past it. He enters into it with them. And as those who bear the name of Jesus and who enter into your own times of suffering where you feel alone and abandoned, that's an important point to know. That you're not alone with it, that the God of the universe, who's most clearly seen in Jesus, enters into that suffering with you. And when you weep, he weeps too, even when he knows what he's going to do about it. The Jews see him weeping and they say, see how much he loved him. Pick up in verse 37. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. it was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there's a bad odor, for he has been in there for 4 days." And Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped in strips of linen, and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did put their faith in him. Now, here's what's interesting, right? Jesus gets there. He finally gets to the tomb, and some of the Jews who have observed all this thing, and they're Jews because Mary, Martha, and Lazarus are Jews, and that's who's there. That's the only reason to make the designation. But they look at him, and some of them said, whoa, 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 whoa. This guy made blind people see. I mean, and that's the last sign that John told you about, you remember? They happen up on the blind guy on the side of the road, and the disciples are like, which one? Who sinned that he's born blind? Him or his parents? He somehow sinned before he was born? It was a dumb question. But Jesus comes in and offers another option, saying this happens so the glory of God can be seen. And I offered to you last week that he sees any instance of suffering, brokenness, darkness as a place for us to partner with God in shining his light. That what he needs is not an explanation. What he needs is a sign that points towards God's future. So the blind man is fresh in their minds, and when they look around, they start to say, wait a minute. Couldn't the guy who healed the blind man, wouldn't he be able to keep this sick guy, wouldn't he be able to heal the sick guy so that he didn't die? Especially if he's supposed to be his friend? Now, I do want you to notice that it's still not on their radar what Jesus is actually going to do. They still don't say, hey, there's still an option on the table. They don't think there's an option on the table. They think it's done. They still think if he just could have got there quicker, the whole thing would have worked out, but oh well, that ship has sailed. Jesus says, by the way, are you picking up on the foreshadowing? Lazarus is laid in a tomb that's basically a cave with a stone rolled over the entrance. John's counting on the fact that you know the basics of the story. He's hinting. Jesus says, roll that stone out of the way. And Martha runs up to him and says, whoa, whoa, whoa. Please don't make me smell my dead brother. He's been in there for 4 days. They don't have the embalming process that we have. Her concern is valid. Jesus tells them to go ahead with it anyway. They roll the stone away, and then Jesus says something interesting. He starts to pray, and he says, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. It's a weird place to put a past tense, unless Jesus has already prayed to God and asked him to do the thing. Unless Jesus has already prayed to God to do the thing, and he knows there's not even going to be a smell for Martha to worry about because it's already taken care of. Jesus thanks God that God, past tense, has heard him. This isn't the prayer where he's asking him to do it. This is the prayer for where he's thanking him for already having done it. Thank you that you have heard me. And then he says, I know you always hear me, but I'm saying this so that these people know that you did this. Then he says, he stops addressing God, and he addresses Lazarus. Hey, Lazarus, come on out. Now, let me ask you. If you had been at the tomb when this happened, how do you think you would have felt if some guy showed up and started yelling for the person who died to come out of the tomb? Now, that's kind of funny. I've also seen it happen. I mean, not yelling for the tomb, but I've seen people break down at a funeral. I've been to a lot of funerals. I've seen people who, when they go by the open casket, kind of break down and start asking them to wake up. It's sad, it's awkward, it's this thing where you go, oh, they can't deal with it, they just don't understand. You could be offended. You could just feel awkward because of how awkward it is. The one thing that you don't think is, maybe that'll work. I don't know why I didn't think of that. How do you think you would have felt when he came out? They did not go, oh, well, there you go. Well, I feel silly now. No, they're stunned because the one thing that they know is a constant in their life is dead people don't get back up. But he does. Interesting detail that'll come up later. It tells you that Lazarus walks out still wrapped up in the linen grave clothes and that he still has the cloth over his face. It's interesting later, and we'll talk about this later, that when Jesus is resurrected, probably should have said spoiler alert, when Jesus is resurrected later, they walk in and his grave clothes and the cloth that cover his face are already off of him and they're folded and laid on the slab. Jesus tells people to assist Lazarus in taking it off. When Jesus is resurrected, nobody has to help him. Now, multiple times in the story and his interactions with other people, Jesus talks about to his disciples, to Martha, to the Jews who are asking, when he's saying this prayer, he talks about that they are going to see the glory of God and believe. That's what he thinks they're going to see, what they're going to interact with when they see what happens with Lazarus. N.T. Wright explains it this way. He says, the present passage is one of the most dramatic moments in the whole story of Jesus. When Jesus raised Jairus' daughter in Mark 5, he ordered almost everyone out of the room. And when it was over, he told them not to tell anyone. Now he stands in front of a large crowd, puts his reputation on the line, and shouts for Lazarus to come out. And the dead man comes out. A heart-stopping moment of shuddering horror and overwhelming joy mixed together like dark mud and liquid gold. If we don't feel the power and find ourselves driven to awe and thanks and hope, then we either haven't learned to read or we have hearts of stone. You see, one of the things that you see take place here is that death starts to lose its power. And that happens in a couple of layers. On the one hand, people are terrified of disease and of death because, well, on the one hand, they don't have much to fight it with. Medicine isn't anywhere near where it is now, and we're still scared of some things that we don't know how to deal with. They don't understand all of the things that lead to other things, like what causes a disease or what brings about infection, or what they don't understand all of that. And so a disease, even one that we would consider sort of commonplace today, can be a very terrifying thing because things led to death then that don't even lead to death now because we know what to do with them. But not only that, they live under the Roman Empire. There are people who have been conquered multiple times in their history, and they have this in their memory that they as a people have been conquered multiple times, and they're currently under the reign of Caesar and his army. And Caesar, like all governments at the end of the day, has power because he can kill you quite effectively. So if you don't do the things that he says, he'll kill you with his army, with his police force. He will kill you. Now, I'll grant you that the character of that is different depending on who's in charge and how benevolent they are. I'll grant you that. But at the end of the day, they could control you because they could kill you. The Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, is something that we're very, very famous for. But the peace of Rome came down to this. We have very well-trained soldiers who are very well-equipped all over the place. And if you get out of line, they'll kill you and the peace will be restored. But what happens if you have a people who stop being afraid of death? Who stop feeling like death has the power that you're counting on? Well, those people can't be so easily controlled. So death starts to lose its power. People see death overturned. They see something that's having a more power, more authority than death. I want you to, and again, it's just hinting at it right now. But I want you to imagine what that does to a group of people. I want you to imagine the hope that that can inspire, that death doesn't get the final word, that death doesn't get the final say, that death can be undone. Now, pick up in verse 46. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. The chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. What are we accomplishing, they asked. Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, spoke up. You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than the whole nation perish. He did not know to say this on his own, but as high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation. And not only for that nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and make them one. So from that day on, they plotted to take his life. Okay. So people are freaked out by this, so they go to the Pharisees, who are seen as religious authorities, and they tell them what Jesus did. Man, Jesus came to the tomb. He had him roll the stone away. The sister was worried because they thought that we were going to smell the decay. But then he thanks God for already doing something. He calls for Lazarus to come out, and Lazarus comes out. Man, it was crazy. I mean, they're going to report this because it's nuts and they don't know what to do with it. The Pharisees were, by the way, isn't it fascinating to you that you never get the response? I mean, you got it a little bit with the blind guy that we talked about last week, where they're like, maybe it's not the same guy. You get some of that, but he's like, I'm the guy. And his parents are like, no, he's definitely our son. But here the religious leaders, their response isn't, I don't know how he is pulling this off, but he is conning these people. I don't know how he's tricking them, but it's got to be a trick. That's not their response. People come and tell them what he did, and they go, oh, what are we doing? What are we accomplishing here? If this guy goes around and he keeps performing signs like this, everybody's going to believe in him. Now, look at their rationale, though, because it's not everybody's going to believe in him and not us. I think they are worried about that a little bit, although they wouldn't quite explain it that way. But that's not their rationale. Their rationale is, and then Rome's going to come in. Rome's going to come in and they're going to shut it all down. Now, why would they think that? Well, because that's what Rome does. It's the kind of thing Rome does. Things get out of hand, you can't handle your stuff. Rome comes in and conquers a place, and they don't feel the need to replace all of the government and all of the institutions. They do a couple of things. They find out if your governing officials Well, if your governing officials will toe the line, it's just efficient. You already know them. They already know the system. They already know the lay of the land. So if they're willing to toe the line, why would you replace somebody and have to do all the training again? So they find out now, if you won't toe the line, they'll take you out. But if you will, fine. You can stay in place. You're the king. Good for you. Pay your taxes. They also believe that their Caesar is a god. They have coins printed up and everything. And they're cool with you having whatever gods you've got. You just got another one. Show respect. Just remember, throw up a statue of Caesar, pay your taxes. They run into a little bit of a problem with Jews because they haven't really encountered anybody before that just believes in the one God, and they're not being anymore. So they make an allowance. They say, okay. Well, why don't you just pray to your God for Caesar? Just remember to pray for Caesar, and here's the important part, pay your taxes. But they'll leave all that stuff in place unless it starts causing a problem. And if it starts causing a problem, if it looks like there's some kind of uprising, if it stops towing the line, then they will send in an army, and frankly, they will overkill on it because they're going to shut it down. And the religious leaders are saying, look, we worked this junk out. We fought hard so that they would allow us to keep our religion in place. We even worked out this deal where we don't have to suddenly become polytheistic and worship a bunch of gods or our God and Caesar as a god. We worked this thing out. But if he keeps messing this up for us, then Rome's going to come in and shut it down. We're going to lose the temple. We're going to lose everything. By the way, the rationale isn't totally wrong, because eventually, because of a different kind of rebellion, Rome does come in and shut it down. They do destroy the temple. It absolutely does happen. Just not about this. Then you have this guy Caiaphas, who is the high priest that year. There was sort of a rotating system. I'm oversimplifying this. But there was a rotating system, and you got to be high priest for a year, and then you would rotate out and somebody else would do it. That year is a guy named Caiaphas. Caiaphas, in response to all this, goes, you guys know nothing at all. Don't you know it's better if one guy dies for all the people? Now, it says that because he was high priest, he was given this kind of as a prophecy. But here's the deal. I'm pretty sure Caiaphas thinks he's saying something else. I think Caiaphas is saying, you guys, you're worried about nothing. If we set it up so that this guy dies, the problem goes away. The people are saved. Rome doesn't come in and shut it down. John, who at this point, I hope you're picking up on, who is very clever with the way that he writes things. He really is. John adds a wink to it. John tells you, Caiaphas didn't know what he was saying. But it's actually kind of prophetic if you think about it, because that's exactly what Jesus was going to do, just not in the way that he thinks. Caiaphas doesn't think he's saying, hey, don't you understand that Jesus is going to die as a sacrifice for all of us, and we're all going to come to God's salvation through this? Caiaphas is saying, yeah, that could happen, but if we just let this guy die, maybe even rig it for the Romans to pull that off, then they don't come in and shut us down. Everything goes back to normal. You just cut off the head. The other part of it will die. We're nearing the end of the treasure hunt. We're nearing the end of the mystery. John's been dropping clues all along. He tells you there's so many signs that you couldn't write them all down. But he only gives you 7, and he names them. He gives them in order. This is the first sign. This is the second sign. This is the third sign, fourth sign, fifth sign, sixth sign, seventh sign. Oh, by the way, another weird little clue to drop on you. if you read the Gospel of John, you'll find that as you go through John, John identifies every once in a while, seemingly sort of shoehorned in. He goes, no, it was the first day of the week. Okay. Then you'll go along. He's clearly not just, John doesn't tell the story of 1 week in the life of Jesus, but the next time that he mentions what day of the week it is, he goes, no, it was the second day of the week. He does this all the way to 7. He lays out a week. Again, he's not telling the story of 1 week, but he does this in order. It's the first day of the week, second day of the week, third day of the week. He's very clever. He's hinting forward at something. All of the signs are pointing at something, as weird as they are. The way that he's writing the story is pointing at something. And we're almost there. It's something that has to do with a God who responds to things, even if they're not exactly what he wanted in the first place. A God who enters into suffering and weeps with you even when he knows what he's going to do about it. A God who's the master of creation itself. A God whose tendency is toward saving people, helping people. A God who sees instances of brokenness and suffering and darkness not as phenomena that need to be explained away, but as opportunities for God's light to shine. He's pointing at something. And it's something that has to do with hope, and it's something that has to do with life. It's something that has to do with a way of understanding the story of Jesus that he doesn't quite know that you're going to get from the other 3 Gospels, because I'll remind you, John writes this near the end of his life, and the other 3 are probably already in circulation. John feels the need to tell the story so that you'll see something that you're not already seeing. And if you want to know what it is, you'll need to come back next week. So may we trust in God's timing, even and especially when we don't understand it. May we trust that the God most clearly seen in Jesus loves and cares for us deeply. May we resist the impulse to make an idol out of our ideas about God. May we remain open to what God has to show us, and may the God of hope fill us with all joy and peace so that we may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. And the church said together, amen.
You pray with me, please. Father, thank you for being with us. Thank you, Father, that you sent your Son. That you left us these examples that
Okay, guys, I wrote this song this week to kind of go along with Adam's lesson. I've got some words up here. Join in. I think the rhythm and the melody and everything probably sounds familiar. If I could remember it myself. Okay. So the chorus we're going to go through twice. God, you have heard me, knew you would hear me, spoke as the crowd stood around. They believe that you've sent me, witnessed your power. Lazarus, please come out. Okay. So, my God, you have heard me, knew you would hear me, spoke as the crowd stood around. They believe that you've sent me, witnessed your power. Lazarus, please come out. Saw his sister weeping, Jews that came with her soon, moved spirit in trouble, so I weep too. So death is only sleeping, he rose up from the grave. His words, his heart was beating, his fear no longer remained. My God, you have heard me, knew that you hear me, spoke as the crowd stood around. They'll believe that you've sent me, witnessed your power. Lazarus, please come out. 'Cause my God, you have heard me, knew you would hear me, spoke as this crowd stood around. They'll believe that you've sent me, witnessed your power. Lazarus, please come out. Lazarus did come forward, burial cloth and round, his hands, his feet, and his face. Free him and let him go now. Lazarus did come forward, burial cloth around, his hands, his feet, and his face. Free him, let him go now. My God, you have heard me, knew you would hear me, spoke as the crowd stood around. They believe that you've sent me, and they witnessed your power. Lazarus did come out. My God, you have heard me, knew you would hear me, spoke as the crowd stood around. They believe that you've sent me, and witnessed your power. Lazarus did come out. They believe that you've sent me, witnessed your power. Lost souls will now be found. They believe that you've sent me, witnessed your power. I know my purpose now.
We are having a fellowship lunch today after services conclude, so give us a little bit to clear the room and stay and eat with us and talk. It'll be fun. The rescue mission date is Monday, July 22nd. We'll be cooking from 3 to 5 and serving at 5. Contact Chris and Mola or me if you would like to help. I do recommend that you pick up a bulletin. It's got information that you won't have to remember me saying. You can just read it. That's all that I've got at the moment. If there is nothing else, I'll ask you to stand and they'll play us out.
Oh, great. New song, new set. Just another new one. And then actually, this is a popular one, I think, maybe on the radio. If I listen to the radio, I think I was told by a young person here. 2 parts, bridge and chorus. We're going to cycle through like most contemporary Christian music. By your spirit, I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King has resurrected me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrected. One more time. By your spirit I will rise. Thank you. From the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King, your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. By your spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. Your resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. By your spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King has resurrected me. The resurrected King has resurrected me. The resurrected King has resurrected me. See you guys next week.